and thank you. And
then we'll do the Colonel.
okay, great. And if we could, I hope that we're respectful to the representatives here, both the Republicans and the Democrats. I think we're trying to ask legitimate questions. We're trying to get to the bottom of what happened. And I know the Senate had 7 hours of testimony yesterday. They heard from a lot of people. We've asked, a few more to come today, but we really, truly have, most of us at least, have genuine questions about what happened. And I think they're sincere in many cases. There were a couple that weren't in the early part, but I know with Representative S. Johnson and Representative LeGrand, they were legitimate, fair questions. So we just want to make sure we're respectful to the representatives. I'm also asking the representatives, be respectful to these people. I mean, these are regular citizens of Michigan who've seen things, please, who've seen things that they want to talk about. And you know what? It's pretty intimidating, I'm sure, to come to a legislative committee. Please, everyone. But it's difficult to come to a committee like this and to tell your story. Please, everyone. When you come to a committee like this, it can be tough. It can be intimidating. I know these are very hard stories for people to tell. I just ask that we try to be respectful of one another. And also, we can't, we don't want everybody to hear people yelling in the back. So with that, can you please say your names and tell us why you're here? And we look forward to hearing your stories.
My name is Hima Kolanagireddy.
My name is Andrew Sitto.
And can you tell us why you're here?
I was a poll challenger, and I got trained by MIGOP and also
Where were you a poll challenger?
at TCF Center.
In Detroit.
Yes.
And were you too?
Yes, I was a volunteer at the TCF Center on election night.
Okay.
I got trained by MIGOP and also by the Election Integrity Fund, but then I received my credentials from the MIGOP. So on the 3rd of November, I was representing MIGOP on the floor. And all I was doing that day was just stand behind the tabulators. I do IT. I have an IT staffing firm, so IT is my specialty. I was standing behind the tabulator machines, and I could tell right away that most of those people did not know what to do when a ballot gets jammed. And I had to literally stand behind them and say, you need to discard when a ballot gets jammed. And just like the previous witness, what she was saying, yes, those tabulators were getting jammed, at least, like she said, 3 or 4 times an hour. And if they knew what to do when there is an error, they were doing it right. To explain to the other person who was asking, when you take the jammed ballot out, you have an option to discard the number. There is a column that says, that's actually tabulating. That's incrementally tabulating every time a ballot gets scanned. So when a ballot gets jammed, you have an option to go and say discard. Then it makes it 0. But you also have an option to continue. So what happens is when you take those one jammed ballot plus the rest of the ones that got tabulated and put them through again, like feed them, if you say continue tabulating, it will add to that 24 or 25 wherever it got jammed, and then again rescan this entire thing. Like she said, the number only has to be 50. There were machines, at least not the machines I was guarding. I was behind tabulator number 5 and 6. And because I was on top of them, telling them every single time, stepping forward and saying, you didn't make it 0, those machines were doing okay. But I did come across a couple of other machines where the numbers were 300, 400. It's not supposed to be. But I could clearly tell that some of those people didn't know how to discard and start again. So was there an overcount? Yes. Was it off by thousands? I can't tell. I only can tell what I saw. And I witnessed that some people didn't know what to do when it was getting jammed. I don't know how much of training they all had, but some people did not know IT. Similarly, at the county board, too, where I witnessed this big stack of ballots that came in with a note saying not in EPB/S, which is not in election poll book or system. I didn't even know that that can even happen, that you can actually have ballots that are not in the poll book or in the system and still be fed into the system. These people were manually entering it, and I have the table numbers where this was getting done, like the counting board numbers. And they didn't know. They were manually feeding it with a birth date of 1900 something. And when I asked the supervisor why they were manually being fed, they said they did not know. They're only doing their job, and if I have a problem, I could go talk to somebody up there. But the thing is, they didn't even know how to unlock the voter record when it gets jammed. Because I'm in IT and I can understand the code behind it, I had to literally help them. I'm like, you have to go do this and do that. And that's when they kind of knew. So I could clearly tell most of these people didn't have enough training, and they were just monotonously doing their job. And whether it was intentional or not, again, I cannot witness to that. I can only tell what I was there for. And again, I just want to tell everybody here that when we became a poll challenger, our intent was not to get into fights with anybody. I'm an immigrant, and this country gave me a platform to be what I am today. I run a successful IT business. I'm one of the fastest 50 growing companies in America. And I really love this country. When I became a citizen of this country, it was a choice I made. I had to give up my Indian citizenship to become a US citizen. It's a choice we all make. That's a country we grew up in, but this is a country we chose to live. So we just have a lot of respect for this country. Putting ourselves out here, it's not fun. Trying to get our names out there, trying to just kind of intimidate us. You have to understand, coming to a country where we have nobody and then start our life here, it takes a lot of courage. So we do have courage. And especially for me to do this, it's really scary. It was very scary because I am a very private person. I have no social media accounts. I just like to live a very private life. But I knew what was at stake from what I witnessed at TCF, and my heart broke because I had a lot of respect. I still have a lot of respect for this country, and I don't believe in racism as like the mainstream media narrative. This country has given me a lot, and I'm very thankful for it. So today when I'm doing this, it's not because I'm trying to say who's good or who's bad. I'm just saying that this needs to be fixed. In a country like India, we have a national identification card without which we cannot vote. When we come into this country, we have a retina scan, we have fingerprints, everything when we're entering into this country through a border. How is that a vote, which is the single most important thing any person can do, is actually being cast without an ID, without any kind of oversight, and those ballots getting duplicated without an oversight, and all of this fraud that was happening, it was heartbreaking. So that's why I decided to put myself here. Another thing that I noticed is that there were Democratic challengers there. I don't even call them challengers. They were agitators. They were only there with one purpose. When GOP people or nonpartisan people signed up, we were only trying to ensure that there was integrity. Whereas when Democratic challengers signed up, their only purpose there was to intimidate the GOP people and get them out. So that was what was happening on the 4th when I got on the floor. I didn't have my GOP tag on, so automatically I was assumed to be a Democrat. And I have seen some women who came to me and said, let's get these MFs out. And she was singing that song. And for me, I don't listen to secular music, and these days you can't even tell what is cussing and what is a song. So I thought maybe she was really singing a song. But then when I saw that she was targeting white male Republicans, accusing them of something like your mask slipped, you were not 6 feet away, so you need to go out, and your phone was out, and they were really intimidating all these white people. And I put myself out there, tried to help them, saying, why are you getting them in trouble? And they said, why are you taking their side? Then I showed my GOP tag, and then she said to me that I'm on the wrong side because I had a GOP tag on. I was literally shocked that somebody can judge me because of my political affiliation and say whether or not I'm on the right side or wrong side. I can think for myself. But then at that point, I saw that Republicans were getting escorted, and so many people got escorted that we became pretty scarce. We couldn't even man, we had only one person manning 4 or 5 tables because we were so low on numbers, and there were so many Democratic challengers there. So I just went to Election Integrity Fund and got my nonpartisan tag. And the reason I did that was not because I was not there for my party or trying to do something on behalf of my party. I'm just trying to ensure that the right thing is being done. So when I got the nonpartisan tag, at the counting board, the poll workers were very respectful because of my nonpartisan tag. But when I had the GOP tag, the first thing they said is 6 feet. you know the rule or you will be sent out. And I'm like, when I had the nonpartisan tag, not a lot of rules didn't apply to me. So that just told me that, those poll workers, the Democratic challengers, ACLU, and so many other people that were there, their only job there was to block the GOP challengers from doing their job. And when I was with the nonpartisan tag and talking to Democratic challengers, most of them didn't even know what to challenge in a ballot. When I asked him a question, when I was asking supervisor a question, those people were literally confused because they didn't even know what I was asking. And then when I asked one lady, where did you get trained? She said, trained for what? Because they didn't know what they were there for. Their only job, I could tell there, was to block the GOP people from challenging or intimidate them and get them out.
And did you have something to say also about your experience?
Yeah, so because I was a volunteer, I came in for my training around 9:30 p.m. at the TCF Center. 10 o'clock, we went down to the floor. I was stationed by the center of the room. The center of the room, they have all the boxes lined up, and then they have one table full of the duplicate ballots. As I'm sure you're all familiar with duplicate ballots, so they have a table for duplicate ballots. Throughout the entire night, many employees were conducting theft of duplicate ballots. So they would come up to the table of duplicate ballots, grab 3 or 4 duplicate ballots, run back to their table, give one to another person at another table, and never complete the duplicate process. They would stash the ballots under boxes, and I would have to stand there for about 5 minutes and just wait for a duplicate process, and they would just look at me, and it was never, ever completed. So that happened throughout the entire night. Then around 4:30 a.m., we had an announcement that a new shipment of ballots were arriving, and these boxes of ballots were brought in by Mr. Baxter himself at 4:30 a.m. from the rear of the room. So I personally witnessed Mr. Baxter carrying boxes from the rear of the basement of the TCF Center into the tables. So each box, I approximate 600 ballots, and it was like a full, what you have to know is that these tables, there's about 7 tables, they were 10-foot tables each. Every table was full of boxes of ballots. It's not tens of thousands or 20,000s. I approximate 50,000 ballots were brought in. Now, were all of those ballots brought in from the rear entrance to the TCF Center? I don't know. They were brought in from the TCF Center, but there was a lot more than just the ones that were brought in from the rear entrance to the TCF Center. And I'm talking, this is the 6 a.m., this is when we're starting at 6 a.m., the 4:30, 5 a.m. It was 50,000 ballots on the table, equal to the 2 rounds that we did before. We did a round around 10 p.m. to about 1 a.m., and then 1 a.m. to about 4 a.m., and then the boxes were brought in from the rear around 4:30. Then they had the shift change from around 5 to 6. So with the shift change, most of the volunteers were tired at this point. They only expected to be there from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. So 90+% of them left at 5 a.m. I decided to stick around. So they had the shift change. At 6 a.m., Mr. Baxter and his management team got back on the microphone and said, this is what the new shift change, right? The new employees says, this is what democracy is supposed to look like. Right in front of everyone, the whole room cheered. So this is how you know it's a good sign of a violation, that there's an imbalance of poll workers. This is the new shift. Even the first shift before that, I would say the same thing. But this shift, you can tell it's the same, again, another imbalance of poll workers, because the whole room cheered. So based off my sampling of a dozen duplicate ballots from 6 a.m. to about 2 p.m. the next day, because I was doing duplicates, from these duplicate ballots I observed, none of them were for Trump. None of them. And from the other 2 shifts or 2 rounds that we did earlier, only 1 ballot that I witnessed from a duplicate was for Trump. So I'm talking just a dozen off my sampling from that one shift of 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., none. And throughout the whole night, I only saw 1. 3 other challengers around me told me the same thing from their sampling. So also, we challenged ballots all night. Every challenge was refused. They never carried it out. They never issued challenge ballots. There's no track, no remedy, no records, no recording of any challenge ballots the entire night. So we challenged. Poll workers changed duplicate ballots to straight Democrat ticket. So for example, it would be like a mixed ticket, bubbles filled in everywhere. I witnessed employees taking their pen and filling in the Democrat straight ticket when it's not. And so you're going to have other people testify that when it goes to adjudication that they see two different parties filled in. And then 9 times out of 10, you're also going to have testimony too that says that the employees were saying it should go to the Democrats. That's true. Because there's 200 tables, 150 tables, however many tables there are, 5 employees per table, and they all have pens. And I eyewitnessed them writing a ticket for the straight Democrat ticket. So I also witnessed like duplicates of duplicate ballots, which was very strange to me. We were making a duplicate, take it back to the tabulator, and again, make another duplicate of the duplicate. I personally asked the employees, hey, why are we making, first verify, is this a duplicate of a duplicate? They said yes. I said, why? This is the tabulator says unknown reasons. Okay. So, and then I also at the tabulators did see the double counting on the jams. I saw that several times. They would take the ballots that were just scanned and just rescan them again once there would be a jam. And then around 2 p.m., I leave the room for about 5 minutes to grab a snack because they're saying, snacks are coming in, go grab a snack, go ahead. I leave the room 2 p.m. The minute I leave the room, they block out the whole room with coverings. They prohibited access back in for me. And they said it's because we're exceeding COVID capacity. Now I'm going to wrap up with this. Mind you, the entire night, this room was slammed. It looked like the New York Stock Exchange on its busiest day. And then at 2 p.m. the next day, after 70% of the employees have already finished their work, they left the room, now they're emplacing the exceeded COVID capacity rules, which was pure discrimination.
All right, thank you.
I just have to add one thing to this, the ballots that were an issue. I was at table 57 where I said that I saw a stack of ballots which had a sticky note on it saying not in EPB/S. They didn't know what that meant, but it didn't take me long to figure out why it was saying, what it meant. It is, when they would scan a ballot, nothing would come on the system. So they would manually enter these. And that's when I figured out that they were not even referring to the poll book. So it is EPB/S, meaning election poll book or system. So none of these details were in either of those. And the thing that when I started writing down the ballot numbers and the last names of the person of the ballot that had the name on that ballot, they were all in sequence. These are absentee ballots, mail-in ballots. They cannot be in sequence. 2232 cannot have 2233 next to it because if they're mailed in, they come in all different numbers. And when I started noticing that these numbers are almost next to each other, like one or the other was in the middle, but then they were almost next to each other, my antennas went up. That's exactly when I thought something is not right here. Then I asked the supervisor. There was not even a date on those envelopes. It said November 0-2020. There was no second number there. Then I said, what is the date on this one? Then they got really mad at me. They said, you're not letting us do our job. You're disturbing us. And at that point, because we really don't want to be kicked out, so we were just kind of not challenging anything because we want to still stay in the room because we barely had anybody. Not only that, the sequence ballot numbers were all from the same area, like the Goddard Street in the downtown Detroit. Goddard Street, sequential ballots, signatures were all alike. They had no date stamp. It said, it was empty after 0. There was no third or second or first or nothing. And none of them were coming up in the system. They were all being entered manually. They even knew that none of these details would even be in the poll book or in the system.
All right. Well, with that, thank you both for your testimony. We're going to go on to questions now. I'll start with Representative Steve Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here. I think it's the most compelling testimony we've had tonight. You talked about the 6-foot rule, people being kicked out for that. There was a court case prior to the election dealing with this and saying that you had to allow a poll challenger to break that 6-foot rule to verify information. All right, I've got pretty good eyesight myself. I can't see someone's written address from 6 feet away. So the court case made it very clear that they did have to allow that. Now, when you're not challenging, you have to keep your 6 feet. Were people allowed to break the 6-foot rule to challenge? And then my second part, when these Republican challengers were kicked out, were they allowed to be replaced by another one? Because it was very evident that there was plenty of other possible Republican challengers there. Were they replaced by one or not?
I'll take the first, you can take the second. The first one, when you said the 6-foot rule, we were in fact given a paper with these rules saying that we can break the 6-foot rule when we have to challenge a ballot. We even had the printed paper with us, and when we would show it to the supervisor, he'd say, we are enforcing the rules that we were given. That's the rule your team that sent you gave you. We don't have to abide by it because that does not apply to us. And we have to keep low profile. You have to understand if we don't want to be kicked out. If we don't want to be, I may not be because I'm brown. But all I'm saying is, but that was my trump card that I used all day. But then the thing is, that's not a privilege for a white person. So white people, I could see, were not even daring to ask a question because if they were even a little bit louder, they would say, you're disturbing them, so they need to get out. And you have to understand the poll workers were ganging up with Democrats. They were all in on the same team, and the only people that are being isolated are the Republican, white male Republicans. So that's
Please.
the racism. If people ask me, was I ever treated unfairly, I would say rarely. Come to India, you will know what racism is. But here, no, I've been treated with a lot of respect. Now I see white people are being treated as, so much worse than, I was ever treated. So those people were not able to really loudly challenge because they will get kicked out. They did not want to abide by that rule where we can break that 6-foot rule to challenge a ballot because they didn't want to listen to what we had to say.
As per the second question, no.
They were not being replaced.
Republicans
Once
were
you're
not
out, you're
replaced.
out,
So when a
you can't-
Republican challenger was escorted out, they were not allowed to be replaced by another one.
The only ones welcomed in were the media, no challengers from our side. But I would say there was two separate systems. There was our systems where we were exceeded COVID capacity, fall in line, follow the rules, and then there was the friendly welcoming. Oh, you're the media, come on in. Oh, who are you with? You're with them, come on in.
Another thing I also have to say is when the GOP people were getting escorted out with or without handcuffs, every poll worker and all Democrats stood and clapped like it was some kind of, they all won a lottery ticket. And that is exactly when I decided I'm going to do this because that was heartbreaking because these people were doing a job, a volunteer job. They were not getting paid. They all were leaving their work to be here for their country to ensure election integrity. And they were treated like criminals, and that's not fair.
Representative LeGrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could just ask you the same question I asked the last witnesses. When did you, if you file an affidavit here, or when did you first make Trump's lawyers, when did you give them this story substantially?
I didn't meet any Trump lawyers because I was working for Election Integrity Fund. I gave my affidavit the same day on November 4th.
Okay, so you...
I don't know what happened with those affidavits, and I never met anybody from Trump team until, not even now. I haven't even met anybody yet.
Okay, you filed... So you're saying you filed an affidavit on this on November 4th?
November 4th.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
I, in fact,
Representative.
gave all the ballot numbers, the last names, the table number, everything that I observed the same day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative LeGrand. Next, we'll go to Representative Riley.
Thank you. I just wanted to try to understand what this was like when somebody tried to challenge a ballot. So you would say I challenge a ballot, then what would happen after that? What was a series of events?
Even before the supervisor or the poll worker would respond to the challenge, the Democrats would just pounce and say, what are you challenging? And then when we try to give them what was the basis for challenge? Like as I said, they had no clue because they were not trained. Their only training was to block the GOP people. So when we would say this is what we are challenging, they'd be like, they're clueless, obviously. And then the poll workers, they would be hostile. And they're like, we are not going to stop what we're doing. If you have a problem, you go take it up with the supervisors. They were all in on it together, so nobody was going to listen to it. Not a single challenge was ever entered. And this was the same thing happening.
So then if you went to the supervisor, he would not do anything? then?
No, nobody would do anything.
So in addition to that, thank you. In addition to that, when there was no Democrat challenger, which I witnessed in the minority of times, I would make a challenge and the head of the table would say, you know, what's wrong? And I would say, this is wrong. And they say, no, that's not wrong. And I said, no, I'm challenging it. So, I mean, for example, just one example is I challenge you for filling in the Democrat straight ticket. Is that, can I challenge that? No, it's not a challenge. No document, just push it through. That's what they did.
Oh, thank you.
Representative C.A. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, please indulge me. As a woman from the city of Detroit, a woman who has lived, I'm talking about me now, who has lived in the city of Detroit all of my 62 years, and having spoken with many, and by the way, thank you, having spoken with many people who worked the TCF or TFC. TCF.
All right, let's let Representative Johnson continue. And please get to your question, Representative.
I will. So my question really to you, Mr. Chair, I'm going to repeat it again. These people, our guests, are sharing information, just sharing and sharing and speaking and speaking. No one is under oath. The world is watching us right now, and the world is watching right now, and there are one person after another who's testifying or who's making allegations, because that's exactly what they are, allegations of wrongdoing in the city of Detroit. I wonder, and I'm going to ask you the question, did you see any cameras at the TCF Center? All right, so.
And Representative, I just want to remind you, I think it was the purpose of today's hearing to hear from people across Michigan who witnessed things at the TCF Center. That's why we're here.
Well, you know,
So-
here, and I'm not going to argue
Representative,
with you
that's why
about
we're
that.
here. So
Okay, so
I
they're
think
here, but they're
that's-
taking so much time, and I see no Detroiters. There is one Detroiter. Stop that.
Please continue, Representative.
And there is one Detroiter, but I have many emails. Since there's no one who you have in this room to represent Detroiters, except a couple of us in this room, I have emails from Detroiters. We've taken, what, 2
Representative,
hours?
What's your, did you have a question? I'm willing, please stop yelling.
We
People
need
in the
to-
audience, let me handle this. Representative, listen, we've had hearings in the past, as you know. We'll have more hearings. Today, we've invited Mr. Giuliani, and Mr. Giuliani has brought forward witnesses that he says have firsthand knowledge of fraud. That's what we are doing today.
And
you wanna
if
talk
we
about other
want to
hearings,
find out if,
please let me finish.
yes.
All right. So if you want to do other hearings, we're doing more hearings. But today we're here to hear from these people. So do you have a question for these witnesses?
No,
ma'am?
I have some concerns,
All right. Well,
many
we're-
concerns, and I want to
Well,
just
I'm gonna
share
rule
with
you
you
out of order,
what
all right?
the
I'm
concerns
out of order. Do you have a
are.
point of order?
I'm sorry.
Do you have a point of order?
Yes.
What is your point of order?
Point of order is to have them under oath.
You're out of order. As I've said, this is something that is not done here in this state. It's really only.
It may not be done under the state, but you're
not a
allowing
court.
people to come in here and lie, and I know they're lying.
Representative, you're out of order. I've indulged you, but you're out of order, and we're going to move on.
And on behalf of my witnesses, I would like to point out that every single witness we've presented here has sworn an affidavit as to all of these facts.
And so,
Representative, please, I gave you some room there, but we're going to move on. We're going to go
May
now.
I say something, please?
Sure.
If that is what you want me to do, I would do it. And I will still repeat the exact same thing I watched. And you know what? I also want to say one thing. If it is a lie, it may change because a liar has to have a lot of memory power. If it is truth, you can ask me in the middle of the night, it'll still be the same.
All right, I'm going to take this here. Please stop. We're going to move on now to Representative Lefebvre.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it very much. Audience members, we're not going to be able to get to the end of this if we continue with interruption. So I would ask a little bit more patience with us. I have two questions, as we have two witnesses. I hope that's okay, Mr. Chairman.
If there are relevant questions, I will let you proceed.
If they're not relevant, Mr. Chairman, please rule me out of order. I would appreciate it. Question number one, as I heard from, could you say your name again?
Hima Kolanagireddy.
Hima, thank you.
You want to try that?
I'm going to try it once. I'm not going to try it twice because I got a bad memory. I heard that there are sequential ballots from one street called Goddard Street that have no dates.
Correct.
Approximately how many would you say?
Each box would have 50 ballots. There were about three boxes there. I was already tired because we have no chairs. So I took down, after 20, 25 names, there's no point because you can see what's going on. So I immediately wrote down all those details, gave a sworn affidavit to Election Integrity Fund. And I said, this is what I witnessed. These are the names. These are the ballot numbers. And this is not the address, but then I told them that it's Goddard Street is something that just stood out because you can see it on the highway, so I know that name. I'm like, I don't even know what's happening. And we were told not to challenge anything at that point because they said this entire process needs to be challenged, so don't challenge. Try to stay in. Try not to get kicked out. So that's what I was doing.
Very helpful. Thank you. Andrew, approximately how many duplicate ballots did you see in general? And then, if you could, approximately how many of those duplicate ballots, and these are your words, not mine, do you believe were stolen or taken off of the table and brought to places that you believe they shouldn't have been brought to?
So, as my responsibility to stand in the center of the room by the duplicate table, an employee would come up and need a duplicate ballot, right? For example, just to layman's term, let's say there's a coffee stain on the ballot, right? Which none of these ballots had any real issues from as far as I know. They're all tabulator issues. But they would come grab a ballot, and my responsibility was to follow them to their table, to be the challenger, to observe over it. So there would be me, there would be the workers, and there would be a Democrat challenger, and we would observe over it. Throughout the entire time I volunteered, I would say between 24 to 36. And there were times where we had people stationed around the room. And so if there was someone who was stationed, like a Michigan GOP volunteer, right, was in a specific area, I would tell that employee, hey, watch over this duplicate ballot because I need to run back to the center of the room in case someone steals more ballots again. So they would do that. And if no one was there, then I would watch over it. And I watched over maybe 2 to 3 dozen throughout the whole night. So that's the first part of the question. The duplicate theft started in the beginning of the night. Roughly 10:30 p.m., 10:15 p.m., I saw theft of duplicate ballots where they would grab 3, 4. So no clear number. The number that I saw was probably in the first shift, I would say over half a dozen, easy. Second shift, it was more hectic, and I would say roughly the same thing. But you also have to take and consider that the third shift from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. the next day, and also the 1 a.m. shift, because people were leaving at 2 a.m. and 1 a.m. They wouldn't stay until 5 a.m. because we're less people volunteering because they're weeding off. That the table was guarded less, and we have less people, so there's more opportunity for theft. Does that help a little bit?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Thank you,
problem.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Camilleri.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If what you're saying about the tabulation of ballots is true, and that some of these ballots were counted multiple times, why is it that there are not more ballots than those who are tabulated in our poll book?
I do not know how your system works. I do not. One thing I know is there were several ballots that were not in the poll book or in the system, and they were being entered manually. So how are you finally taking a tally of it? I do not know that. All I'm here to tell is what I witnessed. I do not know, end of the day, how you put all of this data together and how you come up with a number. And if it's tallied like a balance sheet, great. I don't think we would be here if that tallied. My best guess is it did not, so that's why we are going through all this.
So what I'm saying is that, in total, the registered number of voters in Detroit is about 500,000 around. The total ballots cast was around 250,000.
Okay.
And so we don't see multiples here, and many other people have alleged that there were far more people who voted than those who live in the city of Detroit, and that just does not add up. It just
Thank
doesn't
you,
add up.
Representative.
That
And I
was
think
not
you've-
part of my
thank you.
testimony.
I
will-
know. I know.
I
Thank
think
you.
you asked a question, and she said she wasn't familiar.
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. With that, I think we appreciate it. I did want to ask you though, do you have any? I mean, both of you have been there on the front lines. You've been there in the TCF Center. You've talked today about what you've witnessed. Do you have any suggestions for us as legislators on policies or things that we should look at in terms of how do we prevent some of these things from happening to people like you again in the future? Have you put any thought into that? Like if you were to see new laws or things that need to be looked at in terms of preventing in the next election some of these things from happening at the TCF Center?
I would give you my perspective as being an outsider. I come from a country where a lot of things go wrong. Our countries are known for corruption. But when it comes to elections, there is, from what I've seen here to what we used to do back in India, it is a lot more organized now because we have an identification system. And the fact that now, as the other representative said, that you can actually show up and vote without an ID, it's shocking. How can you allow that to happen? Like, a lot of people think all Indians look alike. I think all Chinese look alike. So how would you tell? If some Chow shows up, you can be anybody and you can vote. And if somebody with my name, you can't even tell my name. Anybody can vote on my behalf. So ID should be the basic requirement.
Please, let's let her testify, everyone. We want to allow the witnesses to speak. Thank you.
ID should be the basic thing, and there should be a cutoff date as to when you can request the mail-in ballots. It can't be like you can show up the same day and request it and give it the same day. The whole purpose of the ballot is defeated. I think you can put a lot of measures, maybe put policies that this does not get repeated because, and again, the fact that there was not a Republican present on every counting board, that was also a shocker. A lot of people I know from my own church, they wanted to work as a poll worker, but they were told that the positions were full, so they don't need any more Republicans. If only there was a Republican present at every table, maybe a lot of this would have been avoided. And also, I think, that the whole vitriol of the entire poll workers that were there, that to me was the shocking thing. I would expect a lot more respect. These are all fellow Americans. If it was towards an immigrant like me, at least maybe it's understandable, but these are all fellow Americans. Why would you hate them just because of their political affiliation? Maybe that could change. We're talking a lot about hate, BLM, and everything. How about we also just extended to, the white males or, whoever is being also treated very, that's discrimination what I noticed. And this is an outsider perspective.
Do you want to answer the question? Do you have any suggestions for
I'll
us?
be brief. I
Yep.
mean, simply, we just can't let it happen. The way we do it is up to you, and that can change. You have to think about it. Like, law changes over time, and it's going to continue changing for the next thousands of years, but we simply can't let this happen, because if we don't let this happen, then reality will change for the next thousands of years. So I would suggest maybe better enforcement immediately after the election, because clearly we're now heading into December. We don't want to cut it this close. We need, in the short term, a body that can say the day after the election or 2 days after the election, there's 20,000 dead voters, wipe them out immediately. And this should be apolitical, not political. They're just clearly dead. Have the database enforce it. Why are dead voters still, now they're certified now? And I'm not trying to make a political statement, but we certified that knowingly.
Thank you. Well, I know you both are very brave coming here today, and I understand it's shocking the things that you've said today about what you've witnessed at the TCF Center. So thank you both for your testimony. We appreciate it. And now, Mr. Giuliani, I think we'll move on to the Colonel here. It's